Hello everyone, this is FIDE Master Victor Neustroev, and today we are going to talk about how to save losing positions. When you think that the game is all over and the only thing you can do is just resign or make a few moves and then resign, you still have a chance. And this is the webinar which is devoted to how to use these chances to try to save the position. So I'm very sorry about the delay today. I experienced some technical issues because you see I'm in a new apartment, so I had to connect everything. I thought everything was prepared and I actually wanted to start 10 minutes earlier, but instead not everything went well. That's why there was a delay. Please let me know if the sound and video quality is good. So waiting for your comments. Let me check with, yeah, the microphone is working. It should be fine. This is working too. So okay, fine. So looks like I did everything and now everything works properly. Could you please confirm it? Okay, thank you. Fine. So first of all, let me tell you what you can do when you think that the position is completely losing. Well, you should understand that defending losing position is a very difficult task. And if you look at grandmasters games, you see they are trying to use their last chance, even if these chances are really small, in order to play for a draw. For example, if the position is completely losing and there is no way to overtake the initiative. Well, here in Argentina, I faced with such a, well, first of all, I thought it's kind of disrespectful thing because well, I was playing against a player who was, let's say, 2000 or even 2200, and this player got a completely losing position with no chances, at all. So I managed to outplay him, to gain a few pawns. So finally I was 3 pawns up in the rook endgame, and my pawns were really good. They all were connected except one passed pawn, which was already on a3, so I was playing with black pieces, so it was very close to promotion, but this guy kept playing. I don't know what he was hoping for, because if I were in his shoes, I would resign. And I think all chess players of this level would resign, because there was no time trouble, no weaknesses in my position, no chances to play for a draw. So that's why this is where you have to resign. You should admit that this game is over and you should start a new one, and maybe in this new one you will play better. But if only you see at least one small chance to draw the game, try to do your best and try to focus on the game back. Do not think that the game is over. Use this chance, and once you see that this chance didn't work, then resign. So what kind of chances do you have? There are several ways of how to try to save the position. First of all, if you don't have material, I mean, if you are down the material, it makes sense to exchange pawns, because then you can, for example, try to achieve the end game where your opponent doesn't have enough material to win. For example, let's say you are down a knight in rook endgame. So let's say your opponent has a rook, a knight, and a few pawns, and you have only a rook and a few pawns. If you exchange all pawns, rook and knight do not win against a rook. So such endgames may save your game. Well, you can also pass the game to the endgame with the bishops of opposite color. There, being one pawn or even sometimes two pawns down, you can draw the game without any problems. So this is one of the options, to try to exchange pawns when you're down the material. If your king is under the attack, you may consider some sacrifices with the idea to get rid of a mating threat and still keep some chances to draw the game in the end game. However, the most common situation is when you are trying to save the position at the same time organizing the attack on the enemy king. Because in such a case, the material advantage of your opponent may make no sense. For example, if you have your queen enter the attack and your opponent has extra knight on the other side of the board, you may consider doing a perpetual check and draw the game, or you may even look for how to checkmate. In one of my courses, this is the course Evaluate Before You Calculate on Chessable, I demonstrate how one of the grandmasters was able to defeat his opponent being 2 rooks down. So he sacrificed the rook, but then initiated a strong attack, and because of that, won the game. Also, in endgames with fewer pieces on the board, you shouldn't forget about stalemate, as well as doing fortresses, or even fortresses or a stalemate. One such example will be at our webinar today. Well, you can also consider repeating the position, because if your opponent repeats, the game is a draw. If not, then he has to think of what he can do to not repeat, and he has to take some risk to find a better way of trying to realize his advantage. And one more thing. So if you think that the position is lost, you may just make the position as complicated as possible, where you both players may make mistakes. Yes, you may lose there without, well, of course you have more chances to lose there, but your opponent may also make a mistake and you get a chance to overtake the initiative and equalize the game or even play for a win. So we usually use two typical things. We either try to attack the enemy king and provoke your opponent to make a mistake, and sometimes his extra material doesn't matter, or we are trying to make the position more complicated where both players may make mistakes. Anyway, you should, when you are fighting for a draw or you are trying to save a losing position and play for a win, you should keep the concentration and create problems for your opponent that he has to solve. And your task is just to create more and more and wait for his mistakes. Most likely, especially if it's a club player, such a mistake will appear and you'll take advantage of this mistake. Okay. Now let's start. Let's start with the analysis of the first position. Yeah, I'm just checking if everything is working. Yes, it seems that everything is fine today. The only problem was that we started 10 minutes later than I expected and then I scheduled. So look at this position. It's taken from the game. Yeah, look at this position. It's taken from the game between Lev Polugaevsky and Lyubomir Lyuboyevich. Well, black played bishop e6. And if you look here, you will definitely realize that the white's positional advantage is really huge. And it is a decisive factor when two grandmasters are playing against each other. So white can quickly concentrate their pieces on the king side. And the game can be decided with just a king side attack, with a direct attack on the king side. And here black may only hope for the counterplay on the other side of the board. What do you think white should do in this position? What comes to your mind? So if you were white, how would you play in order to play for a win? Okay, so while I'm waiting for your suggestions, let me do some adjustments to the stream. Okay, so everything is done. So what are your suggestions, guys? Okay, so bishop h6, probably bishop h6. So this is what Brian means. Well, interesting. Knight g5 also. In the game, it was bishop e5 with the idea to exchange the bishops, because such move like f6 makes this bishop on e6 more vulnerable. So knight g5 is a good idea. Okay, what else do we have? What other suggestions? Knight g5, so by John. Good. Bishop h6 by Barry. Okay. Well, I think bishop e5 is better than bishop h6. Bishop e5 was played in the game. However, if black wants to play for overtake the initiative and somehow draw the game or try to play for a win, they should use their queen and do something with that queen, or at least somehow bring the queen to the king side in order to help the black pieces to defend their king. So the queen should play the most significant role in the game. And doing this move, then let's say how, knight c8, for example, to protect this bishop, then knight takes e6, f takes e6, rook a3, chasing the queen away. So queen a2 is likely to be a mistake. I think the queen can be trapped there. If not immediately, then sooner or later, after such moves like queen c3, b4, and rook a1. Maybe it's not required, actually. So let's say the queen goes to a4 and b4, leaving the queen on the queen side of the board where it cannot do anything. And only that, white should initiate the attack on the king side. That could be probably the best scenario for white. But they didn't play it. Instead of doing knight g5, they continued with bishop e5. B takes c5, bishop takes g7, king takes g7. And this is where they decided to take with the rook, which is definitely a logical move. When I was analyzing this position with one of my students, she said definitely take with the rook, because c6 is a weakness. That's why for the endgame, it's important to attack the weakness through the semi-open file with two rooks. But instead, d takes c5 was a better move in terms of the attack, because now this diagonal is available. So, or maybe rook a3 first and then d takes c5 to chase the queen away, and then play queen c3 or queen d4, for example. The position of the king is quite vulnerable. Anyway, rook c5, so the first inaccuracy. Rook a b8. Now this queen is really helpful. The queen does attack on b2 and white cannot ignore it. Probably they should play this move, but then h6. This pawn is still a weakness, but at least we prevent knight g5. In the game, instead of defending the pawn on b2, white decided to initiate the attack, and they started with knight g5. Queen takes b2. However, the king is weak, and the queen on that flank is not doing much. So this is a threat. So for example, h6, rook goes to e6. And if they take, it is a mate. If h takes g5 first, then queen f6 with a winning position. For example, this move can be played, because if the king goes there, it's still a losing position after rook e7, rook takes e7, and queen h8 mate. Okay, so queen f4. What do you think black should play now? Because this is a really difficult situation. Rook e6 is coming. So what would you play if you were black? Okay, so I'm checking your suggestions. So rook f8, and Brian thinks it doesn't work because of knight h7. Okay, what other suggestions? Rook f8 and knight g8. Well, I think knight g8 still doesn't work because of rook e6 and queen f7. So, for example, pawn takes, queen goes there, then go there. And I think it's a losing position, but let me find how to win. Because I want to take here, but then king takes g5. If I play h4 first, then rook e7. So maybe still take, go here. Yeah, but then the king escapes. This is what I don't like. Okay, so knight g8, rook e6, f takes e6, and in this position, I should definitely start with this move, and after king goes, so it should be winning. Well, it's hard, but it should be winning. So king f4, queen f5, bishop h3, so king takes h3, and just queen g3, something like that. Well, it's not clear because there were several ways where black could deviate, but I think it works. Another option in this position after king h6 is to just take with the knight, for example. Why not? And white should be winning here too. Okay, so rook f8 was played. Knight h7, just king takes h7, so I don't see the point of doing it. Rook e3, increasing the pressure. But queen goes to d2. Well, this is a pin. So the move is quite logical. But instead of doing this move right now, king g8 first could make more sense. For example, then what? If they take on f6, there is a queen hanging then, and the f2 pawn too, which slows down the white's attack. If, for example, queen f6, then h6, and the knight has to take. Pawn takes, queen e6, but after rook f7, looks like everything is protected and black can hold the position. Okay, so there was a good point. Let's go back. There was a good point after rook f8, knight takes h7, and then take the bishop with the rook. That it doesn't make sense. The rooks are protecting each other. And if you play this, then its queen goes here. At least. Maybe actually this. And then the queens are exchanged, for example. Okay. Fine. So rook e3. Instead of king g8, queen d2 was played in the game. And this is where I want you to find the best move for white. White made another mistake, which seems to be a logical move, but it is a mistake. And mainly because of that, black was able to draw the game. So which move would you suggest for white to continue their attack? H4 just? With H5 idea? H4 in that position, okay. Okay, while you are thinking, let me answer to the previous questions. So, for example, instead of rook e3, could they play rook e6? Take, king g8, knight f8, rook f8. So they gained the pawn. But now black has some counterplay. So queen e3, rook f7. Looks okay. Okay, so Johnny is absolutely correct. There is no time to rush. Knight e6 doesn't work. Queen c7, I think, doesn't work neither, at least because you can play rook b7. But after rook e3, yeah, in this position, so queen c7 doesn't work because of queen d4, I think. No, queen d4, then queen e7. Okay, so queen c7, then we can play. Maybe this is enough, because this is a checkmate. So rook c to c3 to consolidate, and then continue the attack. For example, h6, queen e5, king moves back, knight goes to, knight takes the bishop, pawn takes, queen takes, king escapes, and queen e7. Because if, let's say, rook f7 in this position, this, and now nobody can save this rook. In the game, instead of this move, queen e5 was played directly. So this rook becomes useless. If you want to succeed with the attack, you should bring as many pieces as possible into the attack. So queen e5 check, king goes back, queen f6, and black overtakes the initiative with rook b1. King h2. But what then? Looks like black already achieved something with these pieces, but how to play after that? This is the key move that I want you to find, that happened in the game, and because of this move, black got a draw. So which move I'm talking about? So queen d1. Queen d1 allows the king to escape. So for example, queen d1, king goes, oh, not the king, but yeah, let's say they just take. So it's not queen d1. What else do we have? Queen e5 back? No, I don't think there is a point of doing it. Yes, this move is knight f5. So by this knight sacrifice, black opens the way to attack the king. So what happened in the game? G takes f5, and after that both players agreed to a draw. They both were in a time trouble, and none of them wanted to make any mistakes. That's why this is where they agreed to a draw. So queen f2 could be a possible continuation. Now this rook is hanging, so how to play? Maybe this move to save the rook. Then the game could continue with queen g1, king g3, and queen e1, which is a repetition. If king goes back, it is a repetition. If the king goes to f3, rook b2, threatening with a check on f2, which is almost a mate. So rook c2, rook b3 check. King goes further, queen g3 is a mate. If instead king goes to f4, then it's a check from here, from d2 already. Rook e3, queen takes g2. And this is the next move. So for example, if this, then rook f1. F takes e6. Well, f takes e6, then actually we can do this and pin. If they play something else, for example, this move, probably white could still continue playing for a win. Then let's say bishop d7 to not lose the bishop. And this position is unclear, but here black has so many attacking opportunities, so including rook b2. That's why instead of playing it, white decided to agree to a draw. So what did we do in this position? With our queen being on the other side of the board, we first initiated a counterplay and tried to distract enemy pieces. However, white pieces went to the king side and created a really strong attack. And as the result, we, by activating our rook and the queen, we are able to create some problems to the enemy king. And finally, even we are able to sacrifice the knight in order to get the king more exposed. So we capture the pawn on f2, which is critical for this position, and then we have a lot of chances not only to deliver a perpetual check, but to deliver a checkmate or gain a piece back anyway. So here, activating on the other flank and initiating the attack on their own, black was able to draw the game. Now we have the second example, the game between Evgeny Boreev and Alexander Morozevich. So look at this position. It's white to move, actually. Look at this position and tell me, what do you think about it? So here I'm sure that many of you say that 3 pawns is enough to win. And white would better resign, especially such a strong grandmaster like Evgeny Bareev, assuming he was playing against another strong grandmaster, Alexander Morozevich. So continuing playing here is a kind of disrespectful. I would agree if, let's say, the queens were exchanged or the rooks were exchanged, or maybe even the bishops were exchanged. I would say yes. But with these 3 pair of pieces on the board, there is still a chance for white to complicate the position and maybe to take advantage of their bishop versus knight superiority. So what white may hope for in this position? First of all, they may hope for some inattentive play from black. This is what is common among club players, but is quite rare among grandmasters. Second, they can take advantage of the coordination among bishop and queen, which at least may help to destroy the pawns on the queen side, or maybe to attack the king. At the same time, white shouldn't forget about the pawn on f2, which is also vulnerable. Oh yeah, here this is the move that black wanna play. That's why here Evgeny Bareev continues with bishop g2. So black's task is to exchange pieces. White's task is to capture the pawns or initiate the attack on the king. Queen d1 check, king h2. Queen d2, attacking the pawn. King goes back, so it's fine if the position is repeated. But knight d3. The pawn is hanging, and pushing the pawn forward is a blunder because of the rook. So rook f3. Looks like white is able to hold the position by doing the only moves. However, with rook f3, they are potentially pressuring f7. Knight e1 is a fork, and it seems that one of the pieces is exchanged. But rook f6. I think most players, including me, would just consider this in order to simplify. Rook takes d6 as an intermediate move. Queen checks. King g2, then queen e4, let's say. King g1 and something like that in order to activate the rook. So, what then? Well, one pawn was lost, but there are still 2 extra pawns. However, here the game could continue with this move. Let's say queen goes to f3 and queen takes b7. Well, in such a case, this is a mate. So queen f3, probably they have to play this move. And this endgame is completely winning. Take, here, check, queen f6, queen takes here, b5, so technically winning position, which I'm sure Alexander Morozevich would win with his eyes being closed. However, he decided that with 3 pawns, why does he have to sacrifice these 2? Why cannot he win immediately? And he plays such move like queen d1, and this move is already a mistake. The idea of this move is to play knight f3 and deliver a checkmate. So it's actually already a checkmate. But bishop takes here. Well, knight f3, king goes to g2 this time. So how to play? And in order to play for a win here, black decides that they sacrifice this pawn, so they definitely shouldn't sacrifice the other one. And with d5, they also block the bishop. What do you think white should do now? So white was able to capture on b7. Now it's a bit tricky to win. Well, I agree with you, but d5. So it seems that either the pawn becomes a passed pawn or the f3 square becomes available. What do you think? What's the best option for white here? Rook d6 is a good suggestion, but what about rook d6 and d4 after that? What else do we have? So queen c5 move. Queen c5 is interesting, but what's the point? Okay, so rook d6, d4, rook d8. So the queen is out of the game. Okay, maybe not d4. Maybe in this position I can play knight f3 right away. King g2. So check, sorry, it's a wrong check. This check. King takes. Then I can continue the attack. So check. If king goes here, it's over. So if this move, it's this. This is a mate. King goes h4, it's a mate. If the king goes to g5, then it still should be a mate, but with f6 move first. So rook takes f6 and then queen h5. If they play this move first, it's queen f5, king h4, queen h5. So moving the king to g4 is a blunder. Moving the king to f4 leads to the same. Moving the king to the e file is probably a good idea. But this is where black can activate their pieces. And I'm sure it's a winning position. So for example, this move can be this. They go further and at least the queen is taken. So it's too slow with rook d6. You should keep the rook on f6 protecting f3. Well, queen c5 is interesting, but I think this, and that's it. So queen c5 doesn't work. What else do we have? Let me check. No, queen e4 doesn't work because of the same reason. So in the game it was played king h2 with the idea of that after knight f3 the game continues with king g2. Oh, it seems to be a repetition. Actually, it seems to me that it was possible to win the game with knight f3. So here and then it's a strong attack. Trying to do this, so f3, but queen e6. So the king is in a danger. So king h2 was already a losing move. But the last chance for white, instead of doing king h2, was to play queen to d6. For example, if d4 in this position, bishop comes to d5. Bishop comes to d5, which contains the threat of rook g6, h takes g6, queen g6, which is at least a perpetual check. Bishop f7 is another threat. Well, no, it doesn't work at the moment. Okay. So bishop d5 was a good move. Queen d6 was a good move. If queen b1, then bishop takes d5 with the same idea. So the knight is out of the game. And this rook is better than the rook on f8. However, what about knight f3? So queen d6, what about knight f3? Who can tell me? Then it seems that it should be a repetition. Or maybe king h2 and knight f3. So yeah, it is a repetition. So white plays king h2, and this is a mistake, after which knight f3 was possible. It's difficult to calculate, but if black doesn't want to calculate but wants to do something else, their other option is to play queen b3, protecting the pawn. If, for example, queen e7, then knight goes to d3, and then this knight goes to e5 when needed. So, for example, bishop a6, queen b4, exchanging the queens. We may sacrifice the pawn here, but after king g7, we consolidate our pieces, bring the knight back, and it still should be winning. If after queen b3, let's say they play something else, for example, queen e7. No, not queen. Well, okay, they play queen e7, we play this move, and this is where they play something else. But it's hard to suggest anything because otherwise black just promotes. There is no other active actions. So bishop a6 seems to be the only move. Okay, anyway, king g7 and queen e5. And now black is in the trouble. And this is where we don't care about the material that about the extra material that black has here. For example, a5 just bishop d5 with the threat of rook f7 on the next move. If let's say d4, it's still bishop d5 with the same threat, and this square is already controlled. So this move is a blunder too, because this is a discovered attack. That's why king goes back to g8, but then bishop d5, and this is where black is absolutely useless. So the game continued with knight goes to d3, queen goes to e7 with the threat of this move. However, I think it was already possible to do this. So if, for example, rook f7, then how do you think white continues? So checking your suggestions. Yeah, queen e8, definitely queen e8, so it's absolutely losing. King goes here. rook takes, king escapes, and it should be a mate very soon. So for example, this move, if the king goes here, it's f for first, and then it's rook h7 mate. If the king goes to h5, then it's a check here first, and then it's f4. So there is no way to save the king's position. So queen e7 was played. Now black realized they are losing. They played this move in order to try to exchange the queens, but after bishop f7 they realized that the game is over. So if rook takes, it's over. If, let's say, king g7, then after bishop e6 it's over anyway. So can you imagine that in this position, where black is completely winning with 3 extra pawns, they managed to lose? How is it possible? Well, of course they made mistakes, but our task is to provoke our opponent to make mistakes. So sometimes we don't play the strongest moves, but we're trying to play the most unpleasant moves to provoke our opponent to make mistakes. This is how I play chess, for example. Not all of my moves are the best moves, but I make such moves which are easy to respond for a human player. I have a friend who is international master, and in his games he are trying to create a piece of art. So he's trying to make the best moves according to what he understands in this position. Well, he understands the positions really well. He has some problems with tactics, but his positional understanding and opening knowledge is really good. And well, he tries to do a piece of art from a computer point of view, but it's impossible. Well, I even doubt that Magnus Carlsen can do it. So when you play chess against a certain opponent, your task is to not create a piece of art, but to outplay this concrete opponent at this moment of the time. So he should make a mistake, provoke him to make a mistake. And this is what white did in this game, trying to activate their queen and bishop and trying to capture the pawns either on the queen side or the d pawn. They finally achieved it when black was trying to create a mating net with queen and knight. Okay, so hi to everyone who joined this stream. We are talking about how to save losing positions, and this is the second example. So we have 2 more games, game fragments, it's better to say. And this is the game between Peter Swidler and Sergei Karakin. So this is where we are learning how we can practically save the positions that we assume are completely losing. Well, what happened in this game? Well, here most of you would continue with just a simple move, queen takes f2. I would do the same thing. So queen takes, knight takes, then the rook moves, then e takes d5, and it seems to be equal. Right? So let's say if this move, then the knight goes somewhere, maybe to e4. These pawns are exchanged because d6 cannot be played, and it's absolutely equal. I think this is what Sergei Karakin would play if he was not losing. He was 2 points losing in the match. It was a match. I don't remember what was the tournament. Maybe I can find it. It was FIDE World Cup. Played in 2015 in Baku, Azerbaijan. So, and he was losing 2 points, and his only chance to continue playing in this FIDE World Cup was to win this exact game with black pieces. And he definitely didn't want to equalize. He wanted to play for a win. That's why he played such move like knight f2, which is definitely a mistake, because after that, it's not easy to get rid of the pin. So, for example, this move. No, it's a fork. If, let's say, this move, having in mind that after rook f2 it's queen b1, then just the rook moves, and later the pin is exploited. So this. So Karyakin understood that if he loses the game, it's fine, but he can make the position more complicated, and maybe this is where he can find some practical chances. This is what exactly happened in the game. The game continued with queen e4. Can you suggest the move for white in this position? So queen g3 by Brian. Interesting. So Brian doesn't want to exchange the queens. I think this is the only reason to move the queen. But the queen should be helpful on g3. I think it's not. Queen c3, yes, thank you. It was 5 hand me. Johnny suggested rook to e1. So Johnny, rook to e1, well, they are just exchanging these pieces and then the knight escapes. Oh, looks like the knight doesn't escape. Okay, then this move, and it contains the threat of rook h3. However, maybe. Rook f1, maybe you're right. Actually, I can play this move right away. And if queen e4, knight e4, so after this exchange I take with my knight. Okay, fine, interesting, yes, white could hold some advantage with this move. But instead they'd better play queen c3, creating a pin. So there are two pins. Let's say queen d3, queen b2. e5, getting rid of one pin, but then it's a fork, the pawn is lost. No, not rook f2, because the knight is hanging. So knight d7 first, and after the rook moves, then you can play rook f2. Well, the game could be continued with knight h3, let's say. Then if you, well, I think you can take actually. This, then the queen blocks on h2, so it should be okay. Maybe not. Okay, so I don't want to avoid it, so that's why king h2. The queen is hanging, so queen d5, rook attacks, queen goes here, rook f5, and only then white takes this knight, so it's a completely winning position. Extra knight for white. So queen c3 was the best way. In the game instead, it was rook b e1. And black made a mistake. They took on d5 with the pawn. So for example, if now queen c3, it's basically the same thing, because d4 no longer works. Queen d3, queen takes d3. If they take, well, wait a sec. If they take, it's rook takes here. So rook e1, queen d4, knight h2, king moves, then rook takes, and then just king h3. So again, white is completely winning with knight d5. Still, queen c3 would be a good idea. Instead, it was rook takes f2, which is a logical move. But there is something wrong with it. What's wrong? What exactly is wrong with this move? Who can tell me? So it's definitely not rook b6, which seems also interesting because the queen is queen doesn't protect the rook on e1 in such a case. But then queen c3, pawn to d4, rook takes here, pawn takes here, and after rook takes rook on e8, the c pawn can be easily stopped with such move like rook c2. But what's wrong with this move? What would you suggest for black? So guys, waiting for your suggestions. Rook takes f2. Well, rook takes f2, queen takes e4. And then king takes f2. So you are down a knight in this case. Queen takes a3. Queen takes e3. If in such a case, queen takes e3, it's rook takes e3. Rook takes e3, rook takes f6. And this is a fork. If you deliver an intermediate check, your rook is still hanging and white has enough time to save their rook. So queen takes e3 doesn't work neither. What else instead? Okay, again, so Johnny is leading, and it's not only because Johnny is a strong chess player originally, it's because Johnny is improving by taking classes, by taking individual classes with me. So if you want to be quite, well, if you want to become stronger, you definitely should do more chess lessons, and in my opinion, the best way is to work personally with a coach, so doing private individual lessons. This is what actually I was doing. I mean, I was taking lessons from grandmaster in 2018 and 2019, and that helped me to become a FIDE master in just 1 year. So queen h4, yes, Johnny is absolutely correct with this move. Queen h4. What does this move do? I'll show you. So here, Peter Svidler played queen d2, having in mind that everything is protected, but it's not. Instead of queen d2, let's talk about other options. So let's say queen e8. Queen takes f2, check. King h2, queen b6. And black has extra pawn and some chances to win the game. Queen d7, let's say. Then queen d6, queen takes d6, rook d6. And, well, white can stop the pawn in time. This is how the draw can be achieved. But again, white should find all these moves, because this position by the first glance seems to be favorable for black. Because if something like that, which is quite logical, queen d5, then it's just queen b4 at least. Okay, so queen e8 is one option. What else to play? Well, rook f6 is a blunder. The queen is hanging. Well, queen d2. So what's wrong? It's easy. If you just take only one, white is completely fine. Rook b6, they have rook f7, and they capture your queen. This is what I think Peter Svidler had in mind. But instead, you can take on f2 first, and you are threatening to take the enemy queen. If they play, well, if they take on f2, this is x-ray. If they play queen c3, then d4. So you gain a tempo. And after queen c7, let's say, rook goes to f7. So this queen is always attacked, so they don't have enough time to capture your rook on e8 and restore their material balance. So that helped Sergei Karyakin to win the game. Let's go back to the original position where he took this decision to take on f2 with the knight. rook f1 and queen e4. So what did he do? Instead of simplifying and getting a draw, he played a move which led to a worse position, maybe even losing. At top grandmasters level, we can consider this position to be a losing position. And the engine thinks it's +2 for white. So anyway, Sergei Karyakin went to this position in order to get more complications and provoke white to play to make mistakes. And he was forcing white to defend their position. So rook e1 is a defensive move. This move, so the queen is hanging. The knight can be hanging too. So again, they have to find a defensive move. Rook f2. That was a mistake, and queen h4 simply. So by creating several threats in a row, it is possible to provoke even a strong chess player to make a mistake, which exactly was illustrated in this game. So keep the position complicated and try to pressure your opponent with small threats, and just wait until he makes mistake. When he does it, take advantage of it, and that's it. Okay, in this final line, rook f2, not here, rook f2. If queen takes, this is a check, the queen is lost. Yes, but after queen c3, not queen c3. Here queen c3 doesn't make sense, it's queen f2. So here queen d2, rook f2, queen c3 just d4. So the queen is always hanging. Okay, so yeah. Okay, so today we are talking about how to save losing positions, and this game is about complications and threats which may provoke your opponent to make a mistake. And what we have finally, this position, taken from the game between Samuel Reshevsky and Efim Geller. Well, it's black to move. Exchanging the rooks is just a suicide. So rook e2. Well, this is where I think black should resign, actually. I played this position with my student, and she is about 2000 on lichess only. So she is 2000 on lichess. I'm 2500 on lichess. And I lost. I did create some complications, and she could lose. I mean, she could get trapped and the game would end in a draw, but she managed to play. She wasn't doing everything perfectly well, but it was enough to win this game. So actually, if your opponent plays properly, you lose anyway. But there is always a chance that he makes a mistake. And our task is to provoke your opponent to make a mistake. In such an endgame, when we have only fewer pieces on the board, ideally, we should exchange pawns. And there are three ways of what we can do in order to get a draw. What are they? First of all, if, for example, you imagine that we exchange the g and the f pawns for the e and the g pawn, then with the h and the f pawns, it can be a draw in the rook endgame. However, that may not happen. What else? It can be a fortress, which probably I'm going to conduct my next webinar. I've already prepared some material for it, so maybe the next webinar will be devoted to fortresses. So a fortress where white won't be able to progress. And there is also a third chance, and this third chance was realized in the game. This is what I'm going to explain. So how to play? Well, it's important for white to keep the pawn structure and not make the pawns isolated. So they play h4. Rook e4, attacking it. Rook f3, defending it. f6. So pawn exchanges are always favorable for the player who is down the material. Pieces exchanges are favorable for the player who is up the material, but pawn exchanges for a player who plays without material. E takes f6, g takes f6. There was no way to hold the pawn on e5. And king g3. King g6. Rook a3. And black plays f5. Because they want to do this exchange. Looks like now such an exchange is possible. However, rook a6. If the king goes further to g7, then it's an easy win. For example, h5 can be played. Another option is to continue with, well, I only see was with king f3, then g4, for example. Why not? But I would play h5 here and h6, and then try to get my king to g5. Anyway, the king has to go to h5, right? Now, what would you do if you are white? So, can you play better than Samuel Reshevsky? Because this is where he made his most significant mistake. Okay, so rook a8, probably not correct, but I want to check from behind. Well, I think you not only want to check from behind, you want to attack the f pawn from behind. But okay, rook a8, this is one of the considerations. What else? Rook f6 by 5 hand me. John Wogan suggests rook f6 and rook a8. So actually we have two moves. Rook f6 and rook a8. I don't know how you do this, guys, but people who takes individual lessons, such as Brian and Johnny, suggested the correct move rook e8. Well, to be honest, we didn't study endgames, but yes, you're absolutely right. This is the best move. Because later you'll see what's wrong with rook f6. However, let me explain what happens after rook e8. Rook e8, so how do they play? We are about to play this and king g6, h5, for example. Let's say the king goes back, then it's h5, and after this move, rook g8 with rook g5 next. Then two pawns together, you can simply promote them. They are connected to each other. So even if they deliver a check, it's not a big issue. They have to save the rook, h4, so you take, and this is how you win. Let's say this. Then I think you go here, they deliver another check, and you go that way. You can even let them take this pawn because their king is cut off and you promote the f pawn. Okay, maybe it's not the best idea. Okay, so let's first play g3, and after king goes to h3, it's just a mate. No, it's not. No, it's a mate. It's a mate. Right. So king has to go to h6, and then we take on f5. And then our king goes to g4, and we can promote two pawns together. So rook f6 was played in the game. What's wrong with this move? It looks quite natural, right? No. Rook a3. King goes to f2 with a temper. Rook goes to the edge. If they take, it's king h4. And the king is able to go to g4. And that will be a kind of a fortress. King f4, f6, king f5. So black is able to capture this pawn at a certain moment of the game and then stop the g pawn with the king. The only task for black is to not let the enemy king go first, but the pawn to move further first. G3 was played, right? So now, how black should play in this position? Please consider the move. It was a really brilliant move by black. However, you may suggest two different moves, and they are really good. One move is a brilliant move, the other move is just a good move, which also allows black to draw the game. So, what are your suggestions? So I'm looking at the comments. Okay, stalemate. Oh, well, rook f3 for the stalemate by Abakate. Rook takes g3 by Brian. Okay, what else? Well, guys, looks like you are right. So we have two moves. One of them is rook g3, and it's just a good move. Rook f5, king h4. Well, rook h5, this is a draw, right? The king is able to occupy the square in front of the pawn, like that. Such move like king g4, for example, is a mistake. Rook g6, king goes here, and h5. The king is too far to stop anything. Such move like, let's say, rook a5 in this position is also a mistake, because the king goes here. And then the rook goes to e5, and g4 will be played soon. So rook f3 is a brilliant move, but rook g3 was another move that would draw the game. However, rook f3 was played in the game, and it's better because this is a check. So after king g2, this is a move. And again, it's always a stalemate. So here it's a stalemate too. This is what Samuel Reshevsky missed. So he has to go to e2 with the king, rook takes g3, rook takes f5, and after king h4, the white king is cut off, and because of that, it's a draw. So if the white king was already on e6, it would be winning position for white anyway. So king f2, rook a3, rook g5, trying to cut this king, but it's not enough. Rook f5, and now the game ended in a draw. Why? So if this move is played, it's just rook f5, the pawn is lost. If this move is played, it's just king g5, and again the pawn is lost. For example, no, I think you can play rook a7 first, and then play this, and then just simply stop the pawn, getting a Philidor position, and this pawn, well, if you play properly, this pawn is not promoted. But I also like this move, king g5, f6. And now, for example, you continue with this check. I don't think the check is important. Okay, so you continue with this move, then this and this. So do this, attack. They have to push it, then you do this, and the pawn is taken anyway. So it's a draw anyway. So this is how the game was saved. So here you see the idea was based on the fortress as well as on a stalemating idea, when such a move like rook f3 with the idea of rook g3 was played. But the original idea was to play f5 and exchange for the pawn on g4, which would also lead to a draw. So that's why when you have extra material and you think you are completely winning, you should keep the concentration to the very end until the hands are shaken, or for if you play over the board, or until the clock stopped if you play online, for example. Well, it's better to say the hands are shaken and the score sheets are signed. Okay, so that was what I wanted to show you today For those who got late, let me repeat that when you are trying to save the position, save the losing position, the position where you have a losing position or your position is much worse, there are several ways of trying to avoid the loss. If you don't have material, you should try to exchange pawns. Probably you can get an equal endgame. It can be, for example, the endgame with the bishops of opposite color, or it can be rook endgame without a pawn where you still have chances to draw, or a queen endgame where you have a lot of chances to deliver a perpetual check. If you are under the attack, you may sacrifice the material, but to avoid a checkmate, and maybe later in the game you'll get some drawing chances. Also, if the position is just positionally worse or losing, try to organize a counterattack, especially try to initiate the attack on the enemy king. Maybe there can be such a situation where extra material that your opponent has or his positional advantage won't help him, and you'll get a chance to deliver a checkmate or at least a perpetual check. Also, when just fewer pieces are on the board, you shouldn't forget about a stalemate or fortresses, which was illustrated in the last example. Also, you're okay to repeat the moves, because if you're losing, it's fine if you draw the game. It's your opponent who has to think and who has to find how to win. Another more rare idea is to complicate the position, even getting a slightly worse position, but provoke your opponent to make a mistake by also delivering some threats, which happened in the game between Peter Swidler and Sergei Karyakin. So knight f2 is definitely a mistake, and then white is winning. For example, queen f2 was a move that would equalize the game, but Karyakin was playing for a win, so he worsened his position. With knight f2, got a pin, but then created a number of threats, which finally provoked Peter Swidler to make a mistake. So anyway, if you are in a losing position, don't be upset. Try to keep the concentration to the very end and create problems for your opponent, and just wait for his mistake. Just make sure that after he makes a mistake, you take advantage and realize this mistake. Anyway, good luck for you. We are done for today. So this is my new place where I'm going to conduct webinars, so tell me whether you like it or not. I think the sound is okay. Video should be fine too. Well, I have some problems with my nose. I have allergy, which I cannot get rid of this time. So it's spring in Argentina, so that's why I have allergy. If you have any suggestions of what I can do with it, because my usual treatment doesn't help me, so it should, well, I know I just have to wait for a few weeks and everything gonna be fine back, but it's annoying that I cannot fix it, and that's why my voice sounds a little bit different. What do you think about the background? It's a gray wall, which I'm going to decorate soon. Yes, I did, of course, I did try antihistamine. I'm taking these pills. I'm taking the pill which is called centralizine, if I'm not mistaken. What is my Lichess username? It's antimeron. I can type it here. So you can follow me. I'm not playing the games here, only for training purposes. So those of you who are looking for individual chess classes, you can message me at tricksofchess@gmail.com. So I can also type it here so you don't forget. Well, probably you learn it. I mean, probably you already know my email, so you can message me if you want. Did I do the webinar about Maron variation? No, I didn't. There was a webinar about Semislav in general, but maybe I will, because Semislav is my primary opening. However, this time people prefer to play London more often than Queen's Gambit, so I have just a few chances to play Semislav, and it's a very rare lead to Maron variation. So I think the next webinar can be devoted to fortresses. If you have any other suggestions, or you have any just overall suggestions of what can we do in our webinars, of how we can attract more people to watch these helpful educational videos, make webinars more interactive, please let me know. Okay, for now I think we should finish. Yeah, let's finish for today. Well, yeah, thank you, Michael. Yeah, thank you guys for coming. See you next weekend. Yeah, I did create several webinars about endgames. You can look at my YouTube channel, you'll definitely find something. Or you can just message me directly, I'll send you the links. Okay, guys.